Okay, this is the most common offline chlorine feeder on the market. Offline means that it's not connected directly into the line, but it has this tubing that runs from here into the pool pipe, which chlorinates the pool. And I'll show you some common problems this thing has. Okay, the first problem that you have is the actual tablet. It contains acid and it contains a paste that holds it together. So what happens over time is the paste will clog up the bottom elbow valve and it just goes bad. You have to change it out. That's about $8 to $10 for that piece. And also the acid in the tablet will degrade the O-ring in the lid, which will make it tight and hard to get the lid off. You can simply just change the O-ring off. I'll show you the elbow check valve that fails. Here's that elbow check valve on the bottom here. It's just hand tight screwed in, and when you do remove it, make sure you take the tubing off of the regulator also, otherwise this thing might actually snap. So the whole thing has to be disconnected before you try to unscrew that. And here's a brand new elbow check valve. There's a little ball bearing in there. You can actually hear it moving around. What happens is the paste clogs that up and that bearing doesn't move, so it just shuts the flow off to this valve and your chlorine won't be produced. Those tablets will just stay in the chlorinator, not going to the pool. So that's the very common thing that fails almost all the time. If you find that you open the lid and the tablets aren't melting, and this is the problem right here. And depending on the pools, how many tablets I throw in this thing, generally speaking, if the pool's fairly large, I usually put 3 or 4 tablets in the summer to see how they melt. And by the next week I go there, generally they're all melted, keeping the chlorine level high. I don't really move this valve maximum to minimum. I just leave it all the way open, and I adjust the chlorine by the amount of tablets I throw in here. I have some pools that are extremely large, and I almost fill it all the way up every summer. In the wintertime, you really don't need tabs. If you want, you can put 1 in there, and it should last probably a good 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how cold it gets. In California, it doesn't get too cold, so it does still melt. But that's one reason why it does clog up. If you leave a tab in there and it's not melting, the paste will definitely clog up that bottom elbow. So generally in the winter, you don't want to put tabs in here unless absolutely necessary. Okay, so if you have a chlorinator that's not working because the elbow is clogged, use extreme caution when opening it because it's very toxic. The acid in there will have built up to a toxic level. I use this gas mask here when I open it, so let me go ahead and open it up and I'll show you how toxic it is. You can see the tablets have not been melting, and you can see that yellow there, that's all the acid that's built up. It really smells really toxic, so be very careful. So after you fully disconnect the chlorinator from the line, you just simply unscrew this. This is hand tight. You should be able to unscrew it. Let me give it a quick turn. Yeah, as you can see, it's turning pretty easily, and I just unscrew that, take it out. If I shake it, sorry I dropped it there. If I shake it up, you can hear that the little BB in there is not moving. It's just totally clogged up. You can see all the white paste in there. You can clean them, I guess, with acid, I've heard, but I just throw them away and replace them. I don't mess with it. And that will get the chlorine flowing again once you change this part. So this tubing sometimes goes bad. It's very easy to replace. You just buy a new tubing. You unscrew this nut, and it comes right off from there. And you just put the new one in. And they sell tubing. You can just buy new tubing and redo it. It's pretty simple. After you cut the tubing, you just put the nut on, like so. And then you go over to the chlorinator, and you make sure you attach the right line, the flow and the return line. This is the return area. You just kind of jimmy that on, that little thing there. It might be a little stiff, but you can really get it on there. And you just want to get it to sit in there good, flush. And when it's flush, you just tighten this nut up really tight, and that'll hold it from leaking. Now we do the same process here with the inlet part of it. You just stick it on here and tighten the nut. So I got that on flush, and I just tighten this nut up here, and that should take care of that. And that's how you redo the chlorinating line. It's pretty simple. You do the same thing here on this part, and then you're set to go. I'm going to check for leaks right now. And everything's up and running, and there are no leaks. It's pretty simple, and this chlorinator is going to work quite a while now. Any problems. When I change the elbow, probably a year or 2 without having to redo that. Okay, so you don't make any mistakes. Usually they mark it. This is the inlet for the water, and that's where I have the inlet for the chlorinator. And then of course the outlet underneath is going to the outlet back into the return line of the pool. This is the spa bypass, so that's the return line area of the pool. And so make sure you hook it up correctly. If you do it incorrectly, it's not going to chlorinate, of course, because it needs to flow through the return line, and it won't do it if you have it hooked up incorrectly. So again, the inlet goes on top with the controller, and the outlet is where the elbow goes on the bottom to the return line. Okay, one problem you might run into is that the lid is very tight. You can't get it off. And you can just use a wrench or something here and then turn it. I'll show you how I do it right now. What I do is I brace it with my feet at the bottom. Then I use this big wrench and I turn the lid, kind of get it off. And that's one way to get it off. You can use a piece of wood also inside here and turn it. And the usual culprit for that is a bad O-ring. What they do is there's acid in the tablet, so it degrades the O-ring and they tend to expand. This one here, you can tell, got fat. I've seen some that are just really fat. I'll probably show you one that's really big. And here's the new O-ring. See how thin that is? So I just put it in here. I don't put any lube in there, and I just put it back on, and it should make it a little bit looser. They do get old and they get tighter, but that should solve that problem with that tight lid. And I can hand turn it off, and it should seal no problem. I'll turn it on to make sure it's not leaking. And as you can see, the new O-ring did the trick there. No leaking when I turn the system on. And you know, if it's still kind of tight after you did that, changing the lid may help, but I would just change the whole chlorinator. I mean, it's just getting old, it's wearing out. It's time to get a new one.